Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Grand Cathay in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And while CA has stated that their biggest changes, their biggest reworks would be focused on Kislev, they have also mentioned that they're going to give updates to both Xing and Cathay. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to say, well, the Lizardmen need a rework, the Norseguns need a rework. I think from a business standpoint, Creative Assembly's perspective is that, well, we just kind of want to finish Shadows of Change so that it's actually an appealing DLC, because the sales of SOC, even now, with all the discounts, are not especially great. So it looks like they're just going to release Shadows of Change version 3.0, and it is going to feature updates, major updates to Kislev, smaller updates to Grand Cathay and Siege. Now, Grand Cathay as a race in Warhammer 3 does work in a lot of ways. They have a varied roster, they have powerful magics, they have powerful units, they have artillery, they have cav, flying cav, monstrous units. Before Thrones Decay, Cathay actually was much better than the actual Empire, or even the Dwarves. It's kind of this weird combination of having some of the best aspects of both Dwarves and Empire before Thrones Decay, like very powerful units available with a lot of armor, lots of durability, but also the power of the Empire of a versatile unit roster. Well, Thrones Decay has certainly changed that. Now, SOC added a bunch of units to Grand Cathay, but there are a couple of problems with that. One of the problems, one of the chief issues, is with regards to Cathayan campaigns, all of them. Yan Bo's, Yao Ming, Miao Ying. It doesn't matter who you're playing, it is the same dynamic in all of them. In that the early game, in particular in Cathay itself, is interesting. Cathay is one of the best areas in the campaign map. Diverse climate, diverse enemies. And if you're playing Snitch or Lokir, it can be a really fun campaign. If you're playing Cathay, yes, the early game is interesting, but once you deal with that, you're in a very secure position where you don't really have a lot of reason to expand. Because either you don't have viable climate, because mountains are not viable, wasteland isn't viable, and partly because of the way Cathay works as a race, in particular with regards to casualty replenishment, and the way unpleasant climate affects that, you're not really incentivized to go outside your comfort zone. I mean, you could do it, to be sure, you can win, but at most as Cathay you can get plus 10% casualty replenishment, and unpleasant climate reduces that by 8%. And when you're in a situation in a campaign, one of the worst situations, I'm sure, for a lot of people, is that situation where you know you've won the campaign, you know there's nothing more to it, and you can either quit the campaign and be done with it, or you can try and continue onward, but continuing onward is just a grind. That does happen with Cathay because of climate. Now, as for Yan Bo, he technically has a much better situation because of Lustria, but I think I can speak for a lot of people here. Lustria is not a great area of the campaign map, partly because of the movement speed, partly because of how it's designed, really. Just the axis paths, the many choke points that exist on this map, slow movement, etc. It doesn't force you to be more strategic, it just slows you down. It is a problem in the Skulltaker campaign, it is a problem in a lot of campaigns. Over here in Lustria, all of them suffer, unless you have the Underway, which Greenskins and Skaven do. Like, Skorkle is actually the best Legendary Lord to play in Lustria, just because you can get around the entire place faster. I think Vorik should be in Lustria again. I think that would be the best campaign in Lustria at the moment, if you could play the Dwarves over there. But no, not a great situation with regards to the potential of climate. But of course, this does tie into something I think CA should change, beyond like maybe making some more climates viable, or just an inherent aspect of the game where you should be able to get more climate viability the more you play. How CA could handle that, that's a different discussion. I think that there's a couple of major things with the game that I think they should change to improve long-term viability of campaigns. And climate is one of them. Make it easier to access it, maybe give us some research, maybe give us, you know, some, like I would literally spend 100,000 gold or 20k gold to, you know, have mountain climate viable in a Cathayan campaign, just as an example. But if it was a one-time thing, not something like, oh, you move into a province and you can change and you can make the climate viable. Regardless of that, situation. One of the problems is with regards to replenishment. Cathay is one of the few factions in the game, one of the few races in the game, that doesn't have access to a replenishment hero. And this is important. It had actually been one of the major things I had hoped from a unit lore hero change that they would bring in SOC. They gave us training and with the Game Master, and that just kind of didn't fix the problem. Oh, you can get cheaper Jade Warriors. Okay, could I get 20% replenishment for Jade Warriors? That would be fantastic. I mean, never mind the fact that Jade Warriors, the Game Master can only be recruited at tier 3, so that also creates issues. But still, that is certainly an aspect that I think CA should address. How could they address it? Well, keep in mind, I'll try and avoid some major changes over here and just try and keep it simple. I think they should either give the Alchemist a replenishment option. Hell, I'd even trade away increased mobility from the Alchemist, or as an option, in the sense that there are heroes that can give you multiple effects, like, you look at a Runesmith or the Dwarves, you can pick what you're going to get, and I think that should apply to Cathay as well. Like, just add a replenishment to a hero, or even literally remove training, because Cathay can recruit a bunch of high-rank units. They do not need extra experience on units. They could really stand to benefit from extra replenishment. Or just remove Clank's Corruption over here from the Game Master, because it's not really meaningful. And just replace that replenishment. Mind you, I'm talking about the current meta. CA has stated that they are interested in changing the way corruption works, so maybe that would become useful later on, but as it currently stands, it is not especially a useful skill. It's just something you get because, well, I've spent skills in other things, let me just get Cleanse Corruption, right, just to fill up the skill line. But I think that would be a way that they could do it. Though I think it would make more sense from a thematic standpoint if Alchemists had replenishment, and maybe down the line when they release another Cathay in DLC, and I think we can expect another Cathay in DLC, hell, they might be even under contract to add X number of units or do X number of DLCs for Cathay. That's my understanding of it. Like, CA signed a contract with Games Workshop to develop Cathay, and there's a requirement that they need to release a certain amount of content. And we know the Monkey King is coming. So it might only happen with the Monkey King, but it would be a simple step that they could do, which has a change 3.0. Because what they're looking to do, again, just looking to finish Shadows of Change. So that is one of the things. The other thing, I think the compass. Now, beyond the idea that I think the entire system is not particularly well designed, and I think that it needs to be reworked, I think one of the simple things they could do is just allow us to change the compass faster. Give us that choice. Give us those consequences. Because when you have variety, it is useful. But the problem is, even with that, like, you can get 10% casualty replenishment. That's not enough to really make it work, to just completely ignore it. You need like 30% or so casualty replenishment. That's when it's good. So the fact it only goes up to 10% max, and then it degrades when you switch it out, means that when you're playing a Cathay campaign, you either keep the Great Bastion on all the time, or you alternate between Great Bastion and Celestial Lake, because that gives you 15% income from all buildings. Dragon Emperor's Wrath and Warpstone Desert are both insignificant effects. Like, if you're playing a Cathay campaign, you never switch out to anything. Even if you're playing Yanbo, who has access to all these kind of different compass options and can switch it faster, you kind of don't really care about it. Like, with Yanbo, funnily enough, you ignore Celestial Lake, and what you end up doing is using Nangchang Basin when you can get access to it. The reason you do so is because it can give you that construction time -1 turn time for all buildings, and that is a useful aspect. So the compass, replenishment, just minor things, like, trying to keep it simple over here, because I understand there's not necessarily going to be substantive changes. Then we have the Great Bastion. The Great Bastion, which starts as tier 1, it's controlled by a minor faction, so they're not particularly great. I think that the Great Bastion should probably be more along the lines of Tsar Nagrund, like high tier, difficult to take down, like not necessarily tier 5, but tier 2, tier 3 as a starting position with a passive faction controlling it that starts with maybe an army in all of them, maybe no armies but a higher level settlement over here, and not necessarily a faction that's just building a lot of things. It should be effort to take it over. It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, you can easily rush the Great Bastion as village or Zaytan. Now that would create problems in Zaytan's campaign, that would create problems in Village's campaign. Now, problem with Zaytan's campaign is your campaign is pushing you to go east, but in reality you kind of want to go west, so maybe Zaytan could have some changes over there to his campaign. It's just a campaign start. Like, Zaytan is a good legendary lord, but just that campaign start over here. We can talk about Chaos Dwarves and the pace of their campaigns, or just the pace of campaigns and the current meta of Warhammer 3. To be sure, I think there are some changes. Like, I think Chaos Dwarves need to have faster early game, at least. Great race, superb mechanics, but just slow. That is one of the issues. As for Village, yeah, you can rush in Cathay. There's Dark Fortresses, but if you couldn't, I'd just walk west, right? Take all this territory, vassalize a couple of factions, and then invade Cathay from the mountains and more. Or build up a massive army to take the Great Bastion. Basically, I think that the Great Bastion, in terms of a simple change, I think the entire system of the Great Bastion needs a complete overhaul, and I also believe that the Great Bastion threat and the rogue army is just completely meaningless. Like, in this campaign, I have not fought a single rogue army because when they spawn, funnily enough, Zaytan and Village are actually wiping them out. Also, I manipulated Zaytan to start a war with Village, so I haven't had to deal with any of that. Like, basically, Chaos is fighting each other. Masters of Diplomacy over here. I trolled them. I pulled a changeling on them with regards to that. So that's great. Right. But mind you, I think if the Great Bastion falls, that should be kind of GG for Cathay. Like, in a longer term, bigger plan situation, I think the Great Bastion should be an important aspect for Cathay, especially because the Dragon Emperor's essence is tied to the Great Bastion itself in the lore, so if it were to be completely destroyed, he would basically die, and that's game over for Cathay. So I think that could be an interesting dynamic over there. How they change it, how far they want to go with that, I don't know. But those are just a couple of things I want to mention. Caravans, I think they should remove a lot of the minor ogre armies that spawn. Fewer battles per caravan. One of the things I really like about the Chaos Dwarf caravans is you rarely fight battles, and when you do fight the battle, it is a more interesting battle against a more interesting opponent, as opposed to like, oh, you just constantly get ogres on every Cathay caravan you send. So I think that could be an improvement with regards to with the caravan system. Just my personal perspective on that with regards to it. Research tree, yeah, could certainly use an overhaul. There's a lot of things here that aren't especially great, but again, depends on how far CA wants to go with that. Maybe we'll take another DLC if there is another Cathay DLC, and I suspect that it is. I mean, as I said, the Monkey King is certainly coming. The Fire Dragon is very likely coming. Like, the leaks, I'm not talking about Legends leaks. I'm talking about other leaks. The leaks suggest that we would get Golgfag, we would get the Fire Dragon, and we'd get the Monkey King in the next DLC. CA themselves stated that the next DLC would be Cathay. Like, just to point out, it's not like just, oh, some random leak someone invented or legend created and was proven wrong. I could make a whole video on that, but it was literally something CA stated that they want to do more stuff for Cathay. Maybe that changed. Plans do change. Maybe that does change. Maybe they finish their contract and, smaller updates, free content and all that kind of stuff, and they don't release another Cathay in DLC because their plans have changed. Who knows? The final thing I want to talk about is the harmony system. The initial harmony system in the game was not a superb system because it was very easy to get balanced harmony. It was not difficult, but it was really annoying to maintain it. Like, every hero, every lord, research affected it. It created the gameplay loop where, yeah, having perfect harmony was really powerful for a lot of reasons initially, but it was a frustration to maintain it. Not difficult. It didn't require a lot of things, a lot of thought. It was just like, I literally will not build something in a province I just took. It just slowed down your campaign and created a grind. That's kind of the problem with Cathay. There's a lot of good... That's one of the inheritations. There's a lot of good stuff, but until you get to tier 3... you don't really have a lot of unit variety. Like, literally, until you get to tier 3, there's only 3 units you want to recruit. Like, there's more units in a Cathay campaign, but if you're recruiting anything other than Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen and maybe some Iron Hail Gunners, I don't know what you're doing. The only reason you ever recruit anything is you literally don't have a tier 2 barracks and you want to get some range units so that you get Peasant Archers. That's it. That's all the Cathay recruitment. Like, Onyx Crowmen are now worth it, so I think some of these units could be made available earlier on. I also think that we could genuinely use some version of the Warband upgrade system for Cathay. And I'm not talking about the Warband recruitment. I think that should stay unique to Warriors of Caste, but I do believe that to some degree, I think Cathay would be a better race. Like, oh, I have a Jade Warrior. If they got to a certain experience level, I can make Jade Warrior Crossbowmen from them. And then I can make them, Jade Warrior Crossbowmen with shields. Or just, just have a situation where you can make Jade Warrior Crossbowmen into Jade Warrior Crossbowmen with shields. It's literally just adding a shield on the exact same unit. Or take Jade Warriors and being able to make them halberds. It would add variety. I feel that CA should not be in a situation where they're not using these kind of things again and again when they're great ideas. Like, I think the Warband upgrade systems should be the default system for every race to some degree. Not to the same extent as Warriors of Chaos, but to some sensical degree, like this. And that would just be my perspective. Especially when it makes, perfect sense, like peasants becoming, peasant archers or peasant horsemen, Jade Warriors, all that. That would just be my view on that subject. But let me know what you think about that. I think it would be fairly easy to add. Wouldn't be complicated. Then we have Harmony, the point I wanted to make. So with the Harmony system, I think when they initially released SOC, the people who did that had a pretty solid idea of what they were doing. And then people reacted in a superficial level on Reddit and Discord because they're like, oh, there's no downsides. There are. Inherently baked in. Let me explain. Before CA updated the SOC and added these negative effects to yin or yang, there were already inherent downsides. One, that Perfect Harmony gave you minus 25% upkeep, 15% income, 20% movement rate. So you were already losing that. And if you went yang, you not only lost that benefit, you also weren't getting the yin benefit. But on top of that, going full yin or yang, it's very easy to go Perfect Harmony because you mix and match buildings. And that's the most optimal way to earn most money. But if you're going full yin or yang, you're losing out benefits. Like, the best economy Cathay can have, like in terms of money generation, is get yang trade exchanges because they generate more money than Goods Emporium, unless you have like 30 plus economic trading partners. And even then, it's just like equal. So it's just better to go with trade exchanges, combine that with administration centers. So basically, for a money perspective, Perfect Harmony is the best thing. But if you want to build buildings fast, you might think, oh, yin is really good. But here's the thing about that. It might be faster in terms of construction time, but it's not necessarily better in terms of construction cost. Because if you go full yin, you're losing out the lumber mill, which each of these gives you minus 6% construction cost. So you might think, oh, you're getting minus 20% construction cost. In essence, yes, you might get cheaper buildings if it's a province with 2 regions, sure. But even then, it's like you're gaining 8%. You're not really getting, and you are gaining a growth benefit, to be sure. And you're generating more money in the process, but you're not really benefiting from construction costs. You're literally the only benefit in going full yin is that construction time. I'm not exaggerating on this. Like, if it's a province of 3 regions, it's pretty close to equal. If it's 4 regions, it is actually inferior to go full yin in terms of saving money on construction costs. It depends on the province, to be sure. But then what about yang, right? All the recruitment benefits. Well, you're losing all those construction benefits, so it means that going full yang, and you're losing the extra income benefits over here from, you're losing some of the income benefits over here. Like, if you want to have cheap structures, you go lumber mill and goods emporium. If you want to generate a lot of money, you go trade exchange and administration center. That's the smart thing, because each administration center gives you 6% income from buildings. Just kind of worth pointing out. But the point I'm getting to, if you were always trading something away, unless you went perfect harmony. And then people complained on Reddit, and then it's like, well, there's very few reasons to ever go Yang unless you're recruiting a massive army and you just want to get it done quickly. There's not really necessarily that many reasons to go full Ying, because the one downside is you're losing research. That means that some of the benefits over here that could save you money, you won't be able to get them as quickly as possible. So it's not like I went in some of the provinces over here, I can tell you it literally is not worth it. Like the construction time, sure, but again, you're losing other things. So I feel like they should either revert that change, because again, perfect harmony is still like really, really powerful. And I do also think they need to do a further update to the harmony system, because it's a fairly one-dimensional system, I feel. I think someone made a point on my Kislev video where they said, and I think this applies to Cathay, there's mechanics for mechanics' sake. Not because they're good, but just to say we have this amount of mechanics. Now, to be sure, that's something you can say a lot about Realms of Chaos. There's a lot of fluff, not necessarily well balanced, not necessarily well designed. Granted, the pandemic did screw over the development of Warhammer 3, to be sure, don't ignore that one aspect. But I do think like CA had a better idea with SOC, and the downsides that they added here, because people cried on Reddit, was not a great idea. It just means like, yeah, you're either going fully in for the construction benefits, Yang only if you're recruiting, and most of the time you actually just want, if you're playing a campaign in the early game and you have a challenge, you actually just want to go balanced because of the movement range and upkeep benefits, which allows you to maintain a ridiculous number of armies in a Cathay campaign, because you're ignoring a lot of the extra upkeep that supply lines give you, and you're getting ridiculously cheap troops. Just worth saying that, like, when it doesn't matter, yeah, you might want to go fully in, but when you actually do have a challenge on your hands, it's always better to go perfect army. It's also the easiest one, and in a lot of ways the most rewarding one, with the exception of just construction time. Christine signing out. Stay tuned for more.